everyone! So I'm gonna start doing videos where I review what I'm currently reading or what I've read before. It's kind of in line with what I do for a living, so I thought I would do it here. This gives me a little more leeway though, because I'm not just recommending kids books. So I'm gonna be recommending and reviewing books from all different genres and for all audience age groups and whatnot. Today though, we're gonna go over The Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher, the late and great Carrie Fisher, our Princess Leia. So, I think this is a really good book to honor her. It's very bittersweet to read now, since she's passed. She wrote this and it came out before her passing. It actually started as when the sequels were announced, she unearthed some diaries of hers that she had written during the first trilogy. And so she's kind of going back through what it was like for her living through those movies, and then also living through now where she was learning that she was going to come back to those movies. It's an autobiographical book, which I'm really not, I don't read a lot of those. I really don't read a lot of biographies either. If I do, I usually do children's literature versions because they're very condensed. You get all your information and there's always lovely art. So I highly suggest going to children's literature if you find nonfiction books like biographies a little too hard to read. But The Princess Diarist, because Carrie is such a wonderful writer and she's so funny, it's not dry, it's not boring, it's chaotic in the best way, in the way that is truly Carrie Fisher, and I think that's lovely. Style-wise, it felt a little sporadic, so it's not really linear, but I'm very accustomed to a linear type of writing style, but it really mimics the thought process. Like, it's how we think, the way she writes in it. It feels in real time. You feel like you're really there in her experiences. And I think it's the best way to get to the real truth of Carrie Fisher. And I think that's a really beautiful thing in the way that she writes. It's very honest. She puts it all out there. She didn't care, and I kind of love it. So, but with honesty, she even points out specifically, like, pretty early on, it's pure unfiltered recollection of her memories, of her diary entries, of the way she remembers living in the world all those years ago. She does own up to maybe things not being perfectly clear because time takes a toll on the memory, but she says she's never going to say anything that's not absolutely verified by other people or by her. So you don't really have to worry about it being a little outlandish like some celebrity biographies could be. I truly, from my opinion, I think that she's being completely honest here. So that's another good quality of this book that I love about it. It's more about the emotional truth of this book. It's not historical recollection, it's her feelings. So I would kind of classify this biography as like a creative nonfiction work, which again, if you're not big into nonfiction style, this is a good one to get into it. Now also, it's really hard to read this book if you're a big fan of hers or Star Wars, because it's so bittersweet reading it after her passing, because several times she even mentions in this book what will happen when she's gone. So not only do you know she's gone, but she mentions it several times. Something else that I really loved about this book was the relatability. Like, she had daddy issues like the rest of us, and it's really refreshing, because most of the time, how many celebrities can we honestly relate to that they're not trying to pose as normal people, you know? And with Carrie, the feelings that she explains throughout this book, it felt completely honest of a 19-year-old girl. I felt like her feelings that she wrote down, her memories, her issues, felt like exactly what I felt when I was 19 and a teenager. Hers have just been a little expanded due to her becoming a celebrity during this time. You know, we all love Carrie Fisher because we all wanted to be Princess Leia growing up. But I think, which is what I did, I think readers, if you choose to read this book, you're going to realize we have a lot more in common with Carrie rather than Princess Leia, which is also an interesting mixture that she talks about. Like, there's no Leia without Carrie, and there's no Carrie without Leia. And it's a double-edged sword, as you'll find if you decide to read it. It's great, she loves it, but then it's also kind of a hindrance to her life too. And it's really interesting to read about that. So let's get back to that relatability of hers. She has a lot of issues, not just general daddy issues. So she's only 19. She's insecure like the rest of us. She came from a broken family. She's constantly, the way she describes it, is she's always looking for validation. Kind of like the validation she didn't get from her dad growing up, which I think tons of us, especially me, can completely relate to. Is it good? Is it bad? It depends. I like reading about people who kind of feel the same as me because it makes you feel not so alone, and then it might help you if you have issues that are so hindering to your life. It might help you feel as though you can still go on and you can be perfectly happy and perfectly fine. Although Carrie, we know issues, mental illness is always a battle. It's back and forth because we saw that she passed from a overdose of drugs, something that she had dealt with during all these times. So do with that information what you will. But the biggest chapter in this book is probably the juiciest that everyone for years since the OG trilogy came out have been wondering. And is it, did Leia and Han Solo actually hook up? In this book, they do. You heard it here, folks. There was an affair on set, and you would think that she would, well, you wouldn't think since it's a biography, but when you think of affairs on set, you want it to be glamorous and you want it to be sexy and all this stuff, but when in reality you look at it, this is a 19-year-old girl and a married man who's 15 some years older with kids on a set in London. She's new to all this. He's been around a while, and she has these validation issues where she doesn't feel like she's likable. And you see that prosper to this affair. It's really honest. Like, it's kind of like, as a fan, you read it and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah! Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher actually hooked up, Han and Leia for real. But when you see the truth underneath it, it's kind of icky. Like, yay, but ew, and then, oh, poor Carrie, because you see that she had more invested than he did, which is another sadly relatable thing for us regular girls, I'm afraid, when you've fallen for someone who has absolutely no interest in falling for you. So Carrie Fisher is just like the rest of us. Yes, she starred next to Harrison Ford, but she was just as starstruck by his good looks as all of us. And one of those quotes I really want to pay attention to just show you how relatable she is as a 19-year-old girl in this book, is on page 87. She's out to dinner with Harrison and Luke and a few other people from the cast and crew of the first movie in London. I looked over at Harrison. He was, God, he was so handsome. No, more than that. He looked like he could lead the charge into battle, take the hill, win the duel, be leader of the gluten-free world, all without breaking a sweat. A hero's face. A few strands of hair fell over his noble, slightly furrowed brow, watching the horizon for danger in the form of incoming indigenous armies, reflective concerned eyes so deep and thought you could get lost down there and it would take days to fight your way out. But why run? It couldn't really be a hardship to find yourself lost in such a place with all that wit and ideas safely stored there. Hey, wait a second. Share the wealth here. Give the face to one man and save the mind for another, and both would have plenty. She gets it. Carrie gets it. She gets everything. Love it. You can see as she goes through this book that she is very much, in my opinion, suffering from imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of people do, but they just don't realize it. And that ties into her feeling not mature enough or really strong enough actor to be in these movies, which she touches on. So another thing I want to talk about is, it's tied to the relatability, but you might think Carrie's problems were all fame-based. Like, oh, poor little rich, famous girl. But you think you might not connect with the book for that reason. I'm going to tell you, no, I think that you will connect with this book. It's not just, woe is me, famous rich girl. Carrie's very, very in touch with her feelings, and her issues were very real and very common for a girl of 19 that keeps growing into a woman, not really understanding that those issues have a major weight to their future. It seems like some of her issues might be tied to Hollywood, and fame, of course, exacerbated her issues. If you think about her relationship with her mom and her own fame, it's very much in there. It's very interesting. Another big theme that I connected with in this book is she constantly felt like she was never enough. She was never skinny enough or pretty enough, which is tied to her being an actress. She was never smart enough or accomplished enough, like she dropped out of high school. She constantly had that validation issue, so she felt like she was never likable enough or lovable enough or mature enough, which I know I deal with every day, and I'm sure everyone out there does too, especially those people who feel a connection to Carrie and or Princess Leia. I think it's a very human quality that we probably saw in her from the moment we saw her on screen. So it's really wonderful, but also sad to read through her experiences with that. You see throughout this book, she was very at war with herself constantly. And in her diary entries, which are very poetic, a lot of them are just freeform poems. You see kind of a self-destructive but self-aware Carrie, which I think we all kind of are, especially in our diary. We know when we're being too much on ourselves or letting things take over, or be self-destructive when we know we shouldn't be, but we still are. I think that is one of those things that makes Carrie such a lovable person in the end. Like when it comes down to it, she's just a girl. She's not a star. It's just like any one of us. To me, she seemed like she was acting 24/7. I think that ties into the imposter syndrome thing going on, which I can of course relate to, like everything else in this entire book. But she was constantly trying to be the person that she wanted to be. And it's a very toxic practice. And I'm sure all of us, if we think about it, we can see ourselves doing that in many different ways. Like, because she was so focused on presenting herself as this person she wished she was, she missed out on really important moments. She missed out on enjoying life. And I think that's a great lesson to take from this book. Like, when you're constantly being like, oh, I'm not gonna go get in that bathing suit because I'm not skinny enough yet. Well, you missed another year in the sun at the beach, enjoying yourself with no worries. So it's something we can all relate to, but I think it's all something that we, in respect to Carrie's memory, should really learn from and take with us every day. She even talks about when she's doing the fan circuit, like when she's doing autographs and stuff at Comic Cons, she's having to even act that way, but it's hard because it's like people expect Leia, and it's like they don't care it's Carrie. They want Leia all the time, 24/7. You are Princess Leia. But then she's like, but I'm Carrie, and Leia is but nothing but Carrie. So that's a really, really interesting point in the book that I think if a lot of Comic-Con people are watching this, or decide to read the book, it might be enlightening for you and how you treat those people that you are fans of. I would pay attention to that part because I think a lot of the time we forget to treat other humans just because they are these characters or are stars. We treat them different, and we don't treat them as human beings. We see them as objects, which I don't think is very healthy for them or for us. Overall, this was such a well done book. Carrie Fisher has always been an open book, and there's just a funny thing, like she's always been an open book. She always seemed like the person you ask questions, she's going to give you the answer. But there's still so much to understand about her, which is something I found in this book. We might know everything, but we don't understand everything. And this book was a great way to understand it all. I really recommend this book if you are a Star Wars fan, obviously. It's more humanizing. It's always hard to find more content for us Star Wars fans. I mean, we've waited how many years for each of the trilogies, so absorb as much as you can this way. But it's also a fun dive into the culture as well. If you like insight into celebrity or Hollywood culture, I think this is also a very interesting book. It's probably enlightening for that, like I've mentioned before. But also, if you are someone with mental health issues and self-esteem issues, I might give you a trigger warning. It's gonna be hard because it's so real. But at the same time, I know I personally love to read those things because I feel understood by another human, and I think that's a very powerful thing. So I also recommend that to people interested in that type of read, but be careful as always. It can be really hard dealing with our own emotions to then tack on other people's emotions, and being immersed through a reading of those emotions can be a lot to take. So please be careful, but please enjoy this book because I loved it. There's even some pictures throughout it. So if you read it, let me know. And if you have any suggestions for me to read, I'd love to know them. Thank you.